of openness and love. A prophet is not without honor in his hometown. This is what Jesus says. And in church circles, we treat this as a bit of folk wisdom, using it to justify the fairly standard practice of ministers never serving in their home congregations. Heck, I used it to explain why I left Southern Ontario and went to minister in Western Canada. We do it in part because Jesus' pithy words in Mark are extended in Luke's gospel as he shares how Elijah and Elisha performed deeds of power among the Gentiles, but not their fellow citizens. His explanation in Luke enraged the people of Nazareth, and they try and throw him off of a cliff. But I wonder if Luke's version obscures a more important point. Perhaps Jesus was just hurt at being rejected by the people he grew up with. Now, he may have been hurt, but he shouldn't have been surprised. The passage hints at a long-standing attitude that his neighbors had towards him. When they questioned where he got his wisdom and power, they said, "Isn't this the carpenter? Isn't this Mary's son?" And then Mark goes on to say that they were repulsed by him. Those are really strong words, unless you remember that by custom, they should have said, "Isn't this Joseph's son?" That's how Luke told the story. But in Mark's telling, Jesus' paternity is in doubt. He's a mamzer, born of a forbidden relationship. The Talmud says this, even speculating that his father was a Roman soldier. Now, this is pointed to as simply Jewish apologetics against Christian claims of Jesus' identity. But what if Mark and the Talmud are right? And throughout his life, the people in Nazareth questioned Jesus' status. This is something that Bruce Chilton, in his book, Rabbi Jesus, the Jewish Life and Teaching That Inspired Christianity, he explores. Now, it should be noted that a mamzer, Jesus was still part of the Jewish circle. In fact, he was to be treated just as any other children were to be treated. But practically speaking, we know that this isn't how people behave. And so I wonder if Jesus may have spent his childhood barely within the circle, looking into the center where legitimate children, his half-brothers included, would grow up to hold power. Such a formative experience would have shaped his worldview, leading him to sympathize with tax collectors, prostitutes, so-called sinners. And more than that, it would have shaped how he saw God. And so he went on to share meals with outsiders as a way to prophetically make clear that they too are loved by God. Now, all this is, of course, conjecture. But for me, it offers insight into who Jesus is, but also into who we are to be as church. Richard Rohr describes it as being on the edge of the inside. As Richard Rohr puts it, prophets cannot be fully insiders, but they cannot throw rocks from outside either. Rather, it's because they've grown up in the system that they can critique the system. They even quote the system's scriptures and documents and constitutions as a way to critique the practices of that system. We hear Jesus doing just this in the Sermon on the Mount, where he quotes Torah and then offers a new interpretation of what he says. I find this quite comforting, given how the church in many ways has been shifted from a central position to the margins. And this is going to continue given our complicity in the Indian residential school system. We are going to be decentered even more. And I'm comforted because, in many ways, I believe we're being invited back to the edge of the inside where we can do our best work, especially if we make good on our apologies to Indigenous peoples through concrete action and not just words on a page. This placing on the edge of the inside speaks to the most important way we can know how to critique the system, and that is to listen to those on the outside of the circle. I'm sure Jesus did this long before he ate with sinners, but developed a practice of listening to excluded voices. What was accidental became intentional, and we are called to do the same. Now, as a United Church, we have been good at doing this with some groups. I'm thinking of our commitment to women's rights, to LGBTQI plus inclusion, advocacy for children in poverty or people experiencing housing insecurity. And yet I'm struck by how much we advocate for rather than stand in solidarity with, seeing special interest groups more than seeing siblings. And I wonder if this happens because in many ways the church still sees itself at the center. We've not paid attention to Jesus' instructions to his disciples to go into the villages without any provisions, without extra food or cash or clothing. He was inviting them to let go of their customs and practices, their assumptions and cherished beliefs, and to hear wisdom that would broaden their understanding. And I believe that he is inviting us in the same way to sit down with our siblings, to listen to their stories, effectively our stories. And as we do, we begin to see, well, that we haven't always lived out our ideals. Simple example, many congregations still prefer to call a white, cisgender, able-bodied male minister. It's telling. Like Canadians come to terms with our history as a church, we need to listen to an ever-widening circle of voices. To BIPOC, non-binary, disabled, neurodiverse, polyamorous siblings, to name a few. To take to heart Elizabeth Alexander's assertion that everyone is worthy of our attention. Be it someone stitching up a hem, trying to make music somewhere, a woman and her son waiting for the bus, or a teacher saying, "Take out your pencils, begin." She reminds us that in our society, we tend not to notice one another, and that is our loss, especially as church. Rather, if we take seriously who Jesus is and the example he set for us, then we need to go out to the villages with open hands and open hearts. Listening to siblings, especially anyone who's been othered, brings a change of heart and leads the prophet to push for change as well. As people on the edge of the inside, our role is to unlock the system from inside so that we can keep expanding the circle where everyone is truly valued as they are. Now, early this morning, we baptized Mark, welcoming him into this faith community. And what a gift to be able to celebrate with him and his family. In this sacrament, we affirm God's love for Mark, that he is valued just as he is and will be throughout the unfolding of his life. And we commission him to reach out with the same spirit to others, to widen the circle from the inside as Jesus did, to ensure that everyone can equally belong. That will be Mark's mission. It's our mission as well. Again, quoting Elizabeth Alexander, to share love that casts a widening circle of light. May it be so. Amen.